Welcome in 49ers faithful. It is your host, Jose, and Juju Talk Sports. We are here to bring you a very special guest, one that I'm very happy to reach out to, especially on the heels of the Montana documentary, which we reviewed earlier this week. Jerry Walker, former PR director of the team and team archivist for the San Francisco 49ers. Jerry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. We have a ton of questions. Obviously, the Montana documentary was a unique time capsule for both Jose and myself, as I'm 28, Jose is 28. We're both here in our late 20s. So to look back at that time period and really kind of take it in was something that we were really thrilled to be able to do. So my first question to you is, do you think the documentary did a good job taking us back in time and really telling the story of Joe Montana?
I think it did a very good job. Joe is such an interesting person that he's so quiet, shy, off the field. In the locker room, he used to be the locker room clown. And on the field, obviously, is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. The documentary did a pretty good job of showing all that he went through, good and the bad, and the injuries and all that. And I wish they would have filmed it 30 years ago, right before you guys were born, because I would have been a heck of a lot younger looking in the video.
No, yeah, you actually did have an appearance there about midway through that documentary, and you were actually holding up a photo that, most Niner fans should be pretty familiar with. It's one of Bill Walsh, the great Bill Walsh, with Joe Montana, basically drawing up plays in the grass. Take us back to that moment. Was that something that occurred a lot, that, Joe and Bill would kind of get together and just, pick at each other's brains and kind of come up with, ideas or certain plays for the team?
Yes, it was very, very often done. And usually, maybe not so often as just the coach and the quarterback one-on-one, but usually the backup quarterbacks, like when Steve Young backed up Joe, Steve would be involved in the conversation. And not very often did it look like they were drawing plays in the grass. That was an outstanding photo, and I think award-winning photo, caught by Michael Zagaris, our team photographer, for many, many years.
In the documentary, Joe Montana talks about being the 7th quarterback at the depth chart of Notre Dame. He talks about being a 3rd-round pick. We saw another guy that idolized Joe in the documentary, Tom Brady, obviously famously picked 199, 6th round in 2000. Do you think guys like Joe and Tom, they wouldn't be the quarterbacks they necessarily are today without that chip on their shoulder?
Yeah, I think that rather than a chip on her shoulder, I think it's just the desire for competition, and so darn competitive. And I guess to be competitive, you have to have a little chip on your shoulder. But yeah, and Steve Young was just like Joe in that regard. And actually, probably most of the outstanding athletes that I worked with the Niners back through our glory years, maybe they all did have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, but it didn't come out very often, except during playing time on the field.
And with Joe, yeah, we talk about that chip on his shoulder. And obviously, as Niners fans, and I'm pretty sure Niner fans back in the 80s and even early 90s, I'm sure they were pretty fond of Joe, obviously. But what was the kind of his perception from a league standpoint and from other fan bases? What did the league think of Joe? Not just as, not from us Niners fans, obviously we're going to think he's great, but as far as the rest of the league, the other fan bases, what did they think of Joe back then?
The fan bases, it changed. When we would go on the road, he was among the more popular players during introductions. At home, obviously, he was the most popular player during the introductions. I think that the fan base, almost entirely respected him and acknowledged his outstanding credentials and playing ability.
Both Jose and I aren't from the Bay Area. We kind of became Niners fans by virtue of our fathers, our families, and it just kind of became a generational thing. So growing up, I was raised on Walsh is the greatest offensive mind in NFL history, and undoubtedly he was a genius. However, the documentary exposed some potential character flaws that we didn't know about, such as going MIA on the team in '82, seemingly pushing Joe out the door. And I've heard he was, quote unquote, sick to his stomach in '89 when the Niners were still good without him. Do you think the documentary painted Bill Walsh in a fair light?
So I think that, documentary eye of the beholder. And I think that they did a good job directing it and producing it and putting it all together. But some of those, if I were doing the documentary, I probably wouldn't have included so much that really made Bill look bad. In competition, there are things that coaches will do to try to motivate a player. There are things that players do to motivate themselves. That's a good question. And it's, I think that Bill didn't look like the jovial genius that he mostly did in public. What you saw was some behind the scenes type footage. And sometimes when the big lights, when the bright lights aren't on, the cameras can pick up some things that normally the general public wouldn't see. I don't know if I really answered that question, but in short, I guess Bill may not have looked like the jovial genius that everyone always made him out to be in that documentary. No.
No, yeah, I thought that was a great answer. I mean, obviously we weren't there to really experience it firsthand, just like we weren't able to experience situations like Joe Montana and Steve Young. How was that like? Like, how was the fan base? How was the Niner faithful back then whenever we first traded for Steve Young? And obviously at that point, the organization was kind of making it a point that Steve Young was going to be eventually the quarterback of the future for San Francisco. How did the fan base react to that? And who was, the fan base siding on? Were they more of a team Joe Montana guy, or was there people out there as far as fans go that really wanted to see Steve Young maybe even earlier than when they got to see him as a Niner starter?
I think you're seeing a replay of that right now during this past 2021 season and this offseason with Jimmy G and Trey Lance. It's the most popular player among fans is usually the backup quarterback. When the starting quarterback is not having his best game ever. So it's kind of crazy. There were good and bad days to live through. We played in London for one of the seasons, and during the practice sessions in London, Bill Walsh called me in and he said, we have a quarterback controversy. And I said, we do? He said, yes, we do. He said, Steve's really battling for that starting spot and think it'll be good for the team to have a little more competition with. And so we might be using Steve more often in different places during the games. It's like, what? So I think that quarterback controversy was manipulated by Bill. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think he got the best out of both quarterbacks by pitting them against each other at times.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Trey Lance, Jimmy G dynamic because I do kind of want to relate this back to current times. Obviously, sometimes in life we see history repeat itself. And Joe actually made headlines this past couple weeks when he had some vocal support of Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's kind of ironic because Steve Young also has championed Trey Lance in past interviews. Obviously, the Niners have reached higher heights under Joe Montana than they ever reached under Jimmy Garoppolo, but you can't deny Jimmy has had a lot of success with the franchise. Do you think Montana recently put his support behind Garoppolo because of his own experiences that were definitely seen in the documentary?
I think that's a good call on your part. I think that most people do base their opinions on their own experiences, and I don't think either Steve's support of Trey or Joe's support of Jimmy. I don't think either of those were false promotions on their part. I think that whatever questions were asked of them at the time led them to a natural, honest response. And I think that yeah, it is being able to relate old times with new times, current times.
I'm actually going to follow that one up here and stick on the quarterback situation a bit because I mentioned this gentleman earlier, and he was also featured in the documentary. He was featured in the documentary wearing a Joe Montana jersey, a Bay Area local, and has come up in headlines this past week. Tom Brady. What do you think of the recent rumors of Tom Brady interested in joining the San Francisco 49ers? Do you think there's any fire to this smoke?
So the rumors definitely are circulating to that regard. They're also circulating that Jimmy might be headed back to Tampa Bay to replace Tom. I've also heard that Jimmy might be headed to Pittsburgh. So if there's smoke, there's fire is the old expression, I think. And it could be. I never want to say no because so dealing with Bill Walsh over the years, I think 13 seasons with the Niners, dealing with Bill was a special bonding experience in that it took me a few years to realize that whatever I thought his response would be, it didn't turn out that way. I was like, wow, he surprised me. And I think that you never know what's being promoted within the organization unless you're at practice every day. And I'm not sure if I think I went astray of your question.
Yeah, I have here a final question for you, Jerry. You've obviously been with the team for a really long time, and I'm sure there's been great memories. But what's the one memory that really sticks out to you in your time with the San Francisco 49ers? What's that one thing that you always look back to and be like, oh man, I can't believe I actually was able to experience that firsthand?
So probably it would be, the one thing would be actually 5 things, our 5 Super Bowl championships. And everyone was special, everyone was different, and I was really spoiled being able to be a fly on the wall through drafts during the time I was with the team, through Super Bowl preparations, through dealing with new subjects that I'm not sure I could be a PR director today with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. We were so fortunate in that we could walk out to practice and a player could be not on the field because of an injury, and we could be watching practice and none of the media would jump all over it. So the one thing I guess would be our success being the team of the decade and such during the years with the Niners.
I know Jose said last question, but you mentioned the 5 rings and the 5 experiences there. I know so often like teams will give their employees some honorary Super Bowl rings. Did they happen to give you any jewelry while you were there?
So I've got rings, baby. So actually, I designed 3 of the 4 rings, 3 of the first 4 rings, and designed all the women's. So we used to get a ring, and either a ring for the wife or the significant other, or it would be our Super Bowl ring and a pendant. And I designed 2 of the pendants and 3 of the first 4 rings. So yeah, we often go to the banking to the box there. We have the security box there and get the jewelry out for the weekend and then go back and the bank people kind of make fun of me that during the season I often go there more often than during the off season.
I know I'm asking you to compare children here, but is there any ring design you're most proud of?
So probably the most recent, because it makes me feel the youngest. But the first one was, quite a shock that we won that Super Bowl. I mean, it was, I'm being flooded with memories right now of different things. Probably the first one and maybe the most recent. I'm not really sure. I like them all. I actually wear different ones and sort of like split them up and rotate them so that, like, if you drop one or if you hit a file cabinet or something, it's like, oh wait, what happened? Those rings are sturdy. They're not going to be damaged, but it's always a little nerve-wracking.
Well, if we happen to go on the quest for 6 and you happen to help in designing the next one, make sure to send a couple our way down here in New Mexico and Texas, respectively. Jerry, it was awesome getting to talk to you today. I'm so glad that I discovered you on my friends list after the documentary came out and was able to reach out to you. Again, thank you for your time, because this is really cool to kind of look back at the awesome times of San Francisco. As a 49ers fan that had to live through some bad times, getting to look back and think of the awesome times that were in the 80s and 90s with someone who was there was a great experience. Jose, any final thoughts before we let Jerry go?
No, thank you so much, Jerry. That was absolutely phenomenal being able to hear and, go back to those times. I really do wish we would have had the chance to, see Joe Montana and Bill Walsh work their magic, basically designing an offense that's used to this day. I know there's variations of it now, but, they completely changed the league, and for you to be there and experience that firsthand, thank you so much for sharing those experiences with us.
You're welcome. I'm blessed. Maybe next time we can talk, I can tell you some behind the scenes stories that we really didn't get to today. So keep that in mind. Someday we'll talk again and I'll tell you some secrets.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Okay, guys. Well, that was Jerry Walker there. Once again, team archivist for the San Francisco 49ers, former PR director. This is Juju Talk Sports. My co-host, Jose Corral. Stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we will see you next time.